afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to our July edition of SE International's Community Conversations. Our participants are all just starting to arrive, and I'm so happy to be with you again. Welcome, welcome, everyone. So we have a great session in store for you today. Let me begin by introducing you to the platform we'll be working with. I'm sure many of you have been with us in previous gatherings, and probably some of you have not at all. So I just want to make sure we all have exactly what we need to be here in the best way possible today. So I just want to let you know for this session, we are using the Zoom webinar format, and we're also broadcasting live on Facebook and Clubhouse. So what that means is that if you're in the Zoom session, you will get to post questions and maybe come on screen, be interactive with our guests. And we are so delighted for that. So if you're on Clubhouse or Facebook and you want to interact more in that way, go ahead and find the Facebook event and join through the Zoom link you can get by following that registration link. You have to be with on Zoom in order to ask questions today. So asking questions is one of the funnest part of this series because that is where we get to be interactive, connected, and relevant to what's really happening in the world of all of you who have showed up for this. If you're here today, there's a good reason why, and we'd love to just have you completely taken care of and supported by the kind of conversation we have. So you are part of it. Please note at the bottom of your screen, you will see a box for Q&A. I believe the chat is disabled and should be. So if you see chat, you won't be able to post in it, but you'll be able to post in the Q&A any questions you have sorry, I lost my train of thought. You'll be able to post your questions and upvote any questions in that Q&A. So why don't we just go ahead and try it now? Click on the Q&A in your screen, and you will see that there is already a message there from Kiana. And it says, thank you for joining us today. You can upvote that question now by clicking on that little thumb on that message. Go ahead and do that if you don't mind, so I can see that it's working. Yes, there it is. You're all upvoting it. Yes. So what that means is as you all start to put in questions in there and you upvote the ones you want to hear, you're going to still see that one from Kiana at the top because it's been upvoted. Others of you may not want to ask questions. Some of you may want to come on screen. All of our interaction we're going to be doing through that Q&A. So let's try another interaction. Why don't we start to get to know who's here? Please go into that Q&A and type in there where you are chiming in from. We have more than 300 folks registered for today's session, and we know thousands end up watching these on YouTube afterwards. Being present is really critical to us. So type in a little bit about where you are and let us see where you are chiming in from. Now, I want to ask the panelists to not do any typing in the Q&A because it can kind of mess up how it shows up. So that's just a little technical support for folks on the backside. I saw, yeah. Okay, so I just have two of you. Oh gosh, it's all coming in. Here it is. Favorite part. We got West Michigan, Pittsburgh, Evanston, Illinois. We got Asheville. We've got Richmond, Vermont, Hanover, NYC in the house. Westchester County, New York, probably beautiful in this time of summer. Maryland, and wow, Leorin, Israel. I always love that you're here, sweet human. I'm glad you can make it from all the way across the pond. We have more north of New York City, Minnesota, New Mexico, Wisconsin, Fort Collins. Hey, Jared, Talia, and Mississippi. Hey, we're close. I'm on the Gulf Coast too. We've got Ireland. I'm so happy we have Ireland. Croatia. Oh my gosh, our sweet friends in Croatia. We got to do some disaster support there with panels of SEPs who did some work there after the earthquake. Really good to see you. Glad you're online today. We've got Poland and Romania, Finland. Okay, that's the part. Not that I don't love everyone chiming in from North America, but my goodness, when we get how international these conversations are, we really can plug into the fact that the world is present right here. World is present, you guys. Like, let that in. Anything you ask or say, any way you participate today can literally benefit people around the planet. My name is Amie Leigh. I'm the Director of Public Health Initiatives at this SE Institute, and SE International, excuse me. And it's important to me. It's so nice to be here with you guys again. And it's important to me that we're doing these series routinely. Every month we get together on the second Friday of the month to gather around important topics in public health, to begin to take these neurobiological resources many of us in this community are trained in, and to share them broadly, literally around the globe. So thank you for being a part of this free programming. You'll also see in there a little note with a request to donate. That helps us keep this free programming going so that we can reach even more socially vulnerable populations with the kind of resources we have. So thank you for being here today. As we are all coming online, I'm just seeing those numbers go up. So this is a little bit of whittling away the time for a moment while people arrive, but it will help us help the panelists, the guests today in the dialogue, know kind of how to speak about the topic they're speaking at. So I want to play a little game with you guys to find out who's here so we can structure some of our conversation around that. So another feature we'll be using is that raise hand feature, which should be very much in the area where you found the Q&A. For me, it's on the bottom of the screen. I'm going to ask you to hit that raise hand button if you are currently an SE trained coach or practitioner. If you've completed an SE training, you're officially an SEP. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but some of you do. If you're an SEP, would you raise your hand so we can see how many SEPs are with us? Okay, we're seeing that number go up. Okay, but it's not quite as many. So that starts to become really interesting to me. All right, we're gonna lower all hands. And it took some of you a minute too, so I see you're still going. All right, if you are currently an SE student, if you're being trained in the modality of somatic experiencing, which was established by Dr. Peter Levine, and many of us have trained in it as a method to resolve trauma. If you're a student in our program, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. All right, folks, we got more students on the line today. Oh, that's going up, 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 up. Cool. We've got more students than current SEPs. So that means people who are growing, learning, and thriving and sharing this are at the edge of their seat. Okay, I'm just going to interpret this for you. Are at the edge of their seat to learn more about how to apply this kind of work to what they're up to. Okay, I'm going to have y'all stop raising your hands. I'm going to lower all those that are up. Now, if I'm saying SE and SEP, and you're saying, what even is that? What did I come to? I heard about this on Facebook. I thought it's for parents. It is. You're totally in the right place. I just wanted to find out who already knew the modality that we teach at the Institute. If you are not familiar with SE or you have never taken a training in it, please go ahead and raise your hand if you're completely new to it. Oh, that's going up massively. Boom, 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 10, 11, 12, 14, 16. Okay, fun. So that tells me we're going to have a special thing. I'm going to talk to the executive director while we're going through this today to see if we can't get something that we've gotten in some previous sessions to help you all get familiar with SE more if you decide as a result of being here you'd like to. So stand by for that more. Wow. Okay, that number went up. I'm lowering all hands. All right, one more hand raising question. Hair raising, hand raising. If you are a parent yourself, and I'm assuming many of you might be mental health practitioners, social workers, emergency responders of some variety, public health professionals, but many of you are also parents. If you are a parent yourself, please raise your hand. Okay, we're getting a lot. That's okay. Now we're at 50% of everybody's on the line right now. Okay, so at least half of us are parents. Now I'm going to find out how many of us yet don't know how to raise our little blue hand or think this exercise is ridiculous. Ready? Raise your hand if you were ever a child. I'm so funny. If you were ever a child, raise your hands. Okay, everyone's knowing how to use it. Okay, that's a little bit more than half. A little bit more than half of us have been children. All right, that lets me know how many of you are not playing the little blue hand game, but thank you. That's good. All right, we're gonna lower all hands. Just want y'all to get familiar with the screen. As we're talking, please go ahead and be listening for any questions that are moving to you or any questions that come up, and post them, knowing that your inquiry, your questions could benefit everybody else on the line. So I'm going to ask the guests to begin to turn on their cameras and come off mute. And we're going to set the stage a little bit. Hi, Sara. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Chanti's coming online. Okay, cool. So I am so delighted to be with each of you today. I have had the privilege of hearing about your background. I've been thinking about it nonstop since we got together, because there's so many parents in my life and in my practice, and they've been dealing with extraordinary, like beyond measurable stress in this last year. And so by means of us getting to know you and hearing a little bit of your wisdom right off the cuff, here's the question I'm going to ask you to answer. And in your answer, if you'd help us get to know who you are, that would be awesome. Question is, what in your view is important about mental health care and access for parents? And how is it even possible to be well or get care and support while managing baby feeding or being pregnant or toddler watching or school pickup lines or losing jobs while kids are at home and you're working? Oh my gosh, is anybody getting stressed yet? Or hey, maybe you have a co-parent who you disagree with about vaccines and things like that. Or maybe you don't have a co-parent at all and you're trying to do this on your own. What is important about mental health around parenthood from your vantage point? One thing to get us started, and then we'll go from there.
I can start. That's a big question, Amie. And it's interesting because this is the first time I've done anything like this. So I'm noticing like my own nervous system getting dysregulated, just even starting to think about answering it, which I have 5 children, and from ages 27 to 13, and I have a full-time SE practice, and I assist the SE trainings. So the last year and a half, there's definitely been a lot of periods of dysregulation as a parent and a practitioner. So I'm actually just going to even take a minute to sort of like ground myself, which is something that I do a lot, especially when I'm dealing with my kids and teenagers. And so everybody might just do that right now as we're all like meeting together in this moment, you know. And for me, one of the things that helps is just making a little contact with my chest and the floor. Yeah, and just waiting. You know, I think that's one of the great things that SE teaches us is to give the body time. And as a parent, like giving myself time before I interact with my children, especially when my nervous system is completely dysregulated. So yeah, so I'm just noticing that I'm settling a little bit. And that I would say like sort of demonstrating that in this moment and feeling it in my body is something that I've really had to work with as a parent myself, and also my clients during the last year and a half, which has been so overwhelming for so many of us for so many different reasons. So I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for, you know, inviting me, Amie. And I'll always take time to be with you because you're like a breath of sunshine on the screen. So thank you. I don't know, Sara, Chanti, what do you think?
Yeah, you're right. It is a big loaded question, and I really appreciate you doing a little grounding because that was good for me as well. So I'm coming from a practitioner. I'm an SEP and I'm a psychologist. So I work outpatient with parents and kids and adults. And I'm a parent myself of 3. So what you said, Kate, about making sure you take time for yourself or to calm yourself when you're dealing with your kids, I think that is that's the biggest thing for self-care for parents, even if you're, especially in the last year and a half with the pandemic, and you're suddenly at home and you're having to work and you're having to deal with your kids and you're having to deal with school and all of those things. We can get in this mindset as parents that I have to respond right now in this moment to whatever's happening. And yes, if you've got a 2-year-old getting into something, you have to respond right now. But if we've got our 4, 5, 6 and up kids, they're going to remember if they did something that wasn't helpful if you come back later when you're regulated yourself. So I really appreciate what you said, Kate, because if you can just take a moment, if it works for you, like putting your hand on your chest, or I know when my kids were younger, I used to say to my kids, okay, that's when the word timeout was appropriate. I don't know if we use time in now a lot, right? But I would say, mom needs a timeout. And I would just go in my room and get myself grounded and settled before I would respond. And I think that's a big key for our own mental health as parents, because if we're not slowing ourselves down, we're going to have a big reaction sometimes, and then we feel bad later, and then the kids feel bad, and it's a nightmare. And we've all been there. It doesn't matter if you're a therapist, a psychologist, whatever. I think every parent's been there where you're dysregulated and it spirals a mess with our kids. So I think the biggest key for self-care for parents is to monitor your own reaction and remove yourself, or even just tell your child, you know what, I'm just going to take a few breaths. You can breathe with me. You can do some breaths or do some grounding and then address what's going on.
Yeah, that's great, Sara. My name is Chanti, and I work with some parents who have little ones, but most of my clientele, I'm trained as a midwife and a body worker, are the ones who are nursing their little ones and are processing and integrating their birthing experiences. And maybe I've even worked with them with fertility challenges and through pregnancy. And sometimes, as Amie mentioned, she asked, how is it even possible? And I do find that sometimes it doesn't feel possible for these new parents to figure out how to do anything. And so I just want to also acknowledge that and sometimes that, and I felt that way as a new parent. I'm a single mother by choice of a 3.5-year-old, and I thought I knew everything. And I still found those moments where it was like, how am I going to take care of my needs and this little being's needs? And so sometimes I find that it's helpful to just acknowledge and meet the parent where they're at, right? Of course, and say, yeah, sometimes there isn't time. Sometimes it feels impossible. Mm-hmm. And then from there, right, it's like, then we can maybe go somewhere, right? Maybe the tears happen. Maybe there's just I'm normal, right? No one actually gets through parenting having a perfect experience. And so that's something I want to name. And what I like to invite as much as possible is, how can we find support and resourcing from ourselves, as Kate so beautifully shared, right? From grounding and orienting and breathing. Sara, you mentioned too, and how can we also find more support in our lives, right? So access nature, or how can we find grandparent support or babysitters or friends? And of course, it was so challenging in the pandemic where we were so isolated. And so I'm working with clients at this point where we're just kind of unwinding that, right? These new parents who had to have, give birth during the pandemic and be isolated and not see their parents and their family. And so that's really what I'm finding is also, if we can't do it in that moment, right, then let's do the repair afterwards. And so that's how we often, we come on board, right, as support, as practitioners, is let's repattern what happened and help the nervous system settle from how challenging that was. I imagine you, Kate and Sara, also have been doing that now that we're starting to move out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a colleague about this the other day, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I actually really feel like the mental health crisis is starting now. You know, that we have a really long road ahead of us as practitioners in helping repair, you know, all of the sort of heavy load of toxic stress that's been infiltrated in families all across the globe, you know, for various reasons, because of COVID, but also, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and the eruption of the awareness of systemic racism, and how that's impacted families. And, you know, having kids, thinking about kids returning to school, especially in the fall. The CDC actually just announced today that it's like more important for kids to return in person to school, even if like COVID safety guidelines are not in place, than it is for them to be home. So I mean, we have a challenge ahead of us, and I'm so glad everyone's here joining us, because we are going to have a journey ahead of us. Like, if you haven't taken a break in the last year and a half, which I didn't, you might take a break this summer, because I imagine once kids end up back in school, things are going to completely erupt again on a mental health level. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Kate, because I think, like you said, we're already starting to see it. Requests and referrals for support for parents, for support for kids are off the charts. People are scrambling to find therapists and professionals to work with them right now, because so it's already, like you said, Kate, it's already here. And, you know, it's going to take a while for us to get everybody the support they need. And then just to validate for the parents that are listening that, you know, you're not alone in the overwhelm and the you know, you probably all just went into, well, all of us went into some kind of survival mode and protective mode. And so when we do that, our bodies kind of shut down, and we're not as aware of things that are going on, because we have to just focus on what the need is right in front of us. And now that things are starting to open up at least a little bit in many places, now we start to become more aware of some of the things, because our body can kind of start to come back online. And now we become more aware of some of the things that have been in us for the last year and a half. So for any parents that are feeling overwhelmed, you know, it's very true, and you're not alone.
Exactly. And so this is our moment to come out of crisis, right? And to then deal with the crisis we've been in, and then see what's underneath all of the freeze that maybe people have been in, as you're mentioning, Sara. Hi, Amie. Did you want to chime in, or Amie? We see you there, but we can't hear you.
I hid my video from myself, so I didn't know when I'm on screen. So that's fun. But so I love that last bit where you guys just went to, because, you know, Secret Plant, we've put together this panelist of people who are trained in somatic experiencing, because we know it's a really awesome trauma resolution model. But some of you are psychologists, and some of you do direct body work. And I think in the world of this modality, we know that as bodies are coming back online, like, I think a lot of parents are out there thinking, can I find a counselor? You mentioned, Sara, like, it's like, you know, therapists are overwhelmed. There's so many, but, you know, part of why we have Chanti here almost as a plant, it's not uncommon for us in the SE community that we would have someone who's a bodywork professional in with a traditional mental health professional, because we know that there's this whole framework, right? So can all of you from your positions speak to where you see importance of working with the body in any way, whether it is fitness or massage or cranial sacral, or the things I feel certain you all probably do for yourselves, how that relates to nervous system regulation for adults, but also for kiddos, right? I mean, don't we think so many people traditionally think, oh, a massage is for an adult on a cruise. And I'm thinking, how about kiddos with ADHD? Like, what can you speak a little bit about
Sure.
working with kids' bodies and or even babies? I mean, we've just seen the incredible videos of Peter Levine doing trauma resolution for prenatal
Sure.
trauma. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I was a body worker and a midwife before I became a somatic experiencing practitioner, and I trained in birth trauma healing, specifically with Ray Castellino, and so I learned in craniosacral. So learning a lot about how to be with moms or parents and their little ones, and teaching them how to be with them. And so a lot of my birth repatterning work over the years, birth integration work, has been to go to parents' homes and to, as a midwife, I'm used to doing home visits, and to actually have what we call the breast crawl. So have the little one be at the lower belly and then find its way slowly up to the breast or the chest if the parent is breastfeeding or chest feeding, and to do cranial during that time and to tell the birth story in a very slow, titrated way, so that whatever hasn't been resolved can be resolved. And as the parent tells the story, the baby will show the story in its movements. So I'm tracking the baby's movements and what the baby is showing me, right? If there was interventions in the birth, then the baby may have responded to if there had to be suction, or if the baby was taken to the nursery for observation or different things, or even if there was Pitocin or any medications given in the birth, I'll see that in the birth patterning. And so I'll help the parents, I'll name it for the parents and help them kind of make sense of it and share their feelings and honor and acknowledge and listen to the baby's feelings, because inevitably they're going to show us what they experienced and they're going to move it out. And so it might take us weeks of sessions, right, to move out our old traumas and histories and experiences. But babies, they're really quick, right? They're mostly fluid, and they just want to be witnessed. And so they want to show us what happened to them. And when they get that witnessing with support and presence, then often I see them just climb right up and start nursing. And, I'm a lactation specialist, but often some of my clients will have been to 3 lactation consultants already, and it's not a feeding issue. It's actually a bonding and attachment issue. It's a repatterning. It's a healing from the birth story, or even sometimes it's a conception and pregnancy story that needed to be named. So it's really interesting what evolves and happens. And during the pandemic, I have worked online with parents and their babies, and I have done distance cranial, and I'm sure many of us have gotten to be experts at doing distance healing work with the state of the world in the last year and a half. And so I will be holding presence for the parents, for the little ones, and of course asking permission and negotiating safe contact, and it can just be very, I'm tracking. I can, I've been doing cranial over 20 years, so I can track what's happening with the baby and the parents, and then sometimes I'll just work with the mom or the parents and help them kind of repattern, and then give them the homework if the baby, if they don't want their baby to be on the screen. That's a little bit of how I've done body work with little ones. Mostly with moms and parents, and you two probably have done this as well. I'll teach them how to do loving presence and contact with their little ones, and maybe do some self massage and different things to help them feel settled and help them regulate their nervous system.
I love seeing your hands, Chanti, on the screen, because I feel like I can feel your energy just being translated, and it really is such a good reminder of how we can still do that work. But as you were talking, I was just sort of having a flashback to my own early parenting experience, and then thinking about my kids now. Like, my son is 6'5", he's so tall, and just that the importance of touch and contact is so vital, through all of childhood. It's like we spend so much time bonding and touching our infants, and then something happens, I think, especially with adolescent development, like it's like all of a sudden, oh, we better not touch our children. And I really noticed, especially during the pandemic, when we were all home together, like how important that contact was with my children. And then in my practice, teaching parents to do that. And because I couldn't be in person with clients, like when I was working with teenagers, I often invite the parent to come into the session online and then use their own, body to give support to downregulate like activated nervous systems. And my favorite thing, and I do this all the time, my teacher and one of my teachers was Abby Blakesley, and she always talks about using stealth SE with her family. So it's like, oh, you get to do all these tricky ninja SE moves with your family. And I love when I have my kids in the car because they're sort of captive hostages, but just the move of like reaching over and resting your hand on their shoulder, right? Or like just and not moving or rubbing, because sometimes that can be like agitating, but just like, I'm right here. Like I'm lending my regulated nervous system to your dysregulated system, and waiting and watching. It's so amazing to see their system settle, and you're just looking for a deep breath or like the voice to come down a little bit. And that's something parents can do anytime, like no matter where you are. It's like, I'm right here, my body is calm, and I'm going to sort of lend some of that calmness to your dysregulated body. And lots of hugs. Like we don't stop hugging over here. There's hugging all the time. And I love 6'5" bear hugs. I don't know, Sara, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a while back, 70s, 80s, even 90s, the focus began to be on emotion and awareness of emotion. And now I think, especially with things like somatic experiencing, the tide is changing to, it's not just emotion, but it's about, and not just emotion regulation, but it's body regulation, and understanding that a lot of those really big emotions are coming because our whole entire being, our nervous system is not regulated. So, in working with parents around regulation with their kids, it's helping them see it's not just a defiant behavior or a defiant, or a really big emotion, or they're trying, I'm sure as parents, we've all had that moment where you think your child is acting like a brat on purpose. We have those moments, but if that's all we see when we see our child, we're missing the bigger picture. And so being able to notice that it's about regulation and nervous system regulation. So how do I work with my own regulation first as a parent? And then how do I notice if my child is having a really big emotion, that it's about regulation, nervous system regulation, body regulation. And so like what you said, Kate, being able to put your hand on them, or, getting them engaged in movement, and sometimes parents will say, well, aren't you just rewarding their bad behavior then if you go do something fun or whatever? And no, like what you're doing is you're getting the child regulated. It might be, like you said, Kate, just a hand, or, bringing in what you're saying, Chanti, about like just that presence, being able to be regulated and present with them, a hand on their shoulder, or you get them involved in some kind of swinging or a song, or if they've got a lot of energy, you go run around the house a couple times, and then you come back in and see where they're at. Now you can address if there was a behavioral issue. But so I think there's this overall shift happening in the world that I think somatic experiencing is a big part of, is helping people understand that it's more about the nervous system regulation than it is about emotion identification and telling yourself to calm down. Like, we all know when has it ever worked for somebody to tell you calm down and it works?
Right.
But somehow we think as parents, if I say that to my kid, they'll just calm down. Like it doesn't work. So, but if we can bring in some kind of intervention and help them move to a better space. Now, when everybody's regulated, we can go back.
Mhm.
Being with you all saying this, I cannot not acknowledge that I'm actually going to say this, my inner little kid just ran around the house. And as the three of you speak, you have such a beautiful cadence that I notice. So I'm just going to put this to other attendees to notice this for yourself. I'm noticing my nervous system aligning with yours as each of you are speaking. As hosting this, I always show up activated, excited. Thank you for sharing the enthusiasm. But you clearly, maybe even more, and I don't mean this in any insulting way to any other SCP I've ever worked with, but each one of you, probably particularly because you work with children and babies, have a very strong sense of your own cadence and how you're delivering messages. And so I just want to name that for people with us who may not be familiar with the somatic experiencing modality that we're talking a little bit about. This idea of regulating someone else by being regulated yourself is real. Like I'm experiencing that over here. So thank you. Needed it.
Can I say one thing to that? Because I wasn't always like this, you know, and you can see it in my children, the ones that got more SE mommy, like are much more embodied than the other ones. And the training for me, you know, I was a psychotherapist and did traditional psychodynamic psychotherapy and dug into this, like, you know, good enough mother stuff from Winnicott. And but once I did the training, my whole being changed. It was like I couldn't believe it, and I really embody it now. It's so. I still am amazed 10 years later how much my nervous system changed, coming from a childhood that had so much trauma and being able to be in this body now that's no longer living in what we call the threat response cycle, and to be able to show up and teach parents, like, it's, yeah, that if you can work with your own body, like your children will just like lap it up. Their nervous systems will settle. Yeah. Thank you for naming that, because I'm still shocked sometimes when people are like, you're so calm. I'm like, okay.
Really?
I wasn't.
Yeah. No, I get that. And you know, these aren't meant to necessarily be commercials for us, you know, but I think you all might agree, in your different fields, you're all quite experts in your field. You've been working with children and their parents, adolescents, babies, and there's something about switching from the traditional approach into this nervous system embodied approach that you're all nodding your head. It's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. So some people who are with us today, you know, are therapeutic practitioners exploring for themselves actual bona fide resources that we can give them. So let's give them some. And some are just parents or people who, not just, sorry, wrong one to say just parents. But some are parents who are really just looking for outlets. So I wonder if you guys can, here's what I want to pitch to you, because I'm not seeing a lot of questions pop up in the chat. So folks, please pop some questions in. You can see we have these brilliant humans with us today who are magnificent in their fields. But I wonder if you could say a little bit about, specifically what I'm hearing a lot about is behavioral issues with kids and even tiny babies, saying something's wrong, something's off. Do I get it diagnosed for Asperger's or ADHD or spectrum disorder, or is this normal, or is this COVID? And I know a lot of parents are just really confused about how do they interpret what's going on. And then I can imagine as a new parent, you're like, I don't even know where to go for help. I mean, child psychotherapist, is that what I look for? I mean, where do you even begin? How do you find people with expertise like you? And what are some ways we can check our kiddos' behavior to bring them online for more health and support them using methods that you might use? If you could walk us through some, that would be really fun.
I can start. Yeah, so people actually find me searching for postpartum somatic experiencing, looking for trauma healing, somatic postpartum, and that's usually when I get my clients, or fertility, postpartum or pregnancy and childbirth. But so you can search for me. There aren't that many of us who really specialize in like the childbearing years and trauma healing. What I wanted to say though from about that is that you know, Kate was sharing that she became more of an SE mommy later on, and you know, I had my SE training and then I became a mother, and I had a lot of postpartum challenges, and it totally threw me. I had all these skills. I'd been a midwife for 15 years, and so that actually has really helped me with my clients now, and in my kind of my understanding is that even if we do have a lot of skills, it still can be really challenging, and that when we have those skills, then later on we can make sense of it. And I think I kind of shared that earlier, but a lot of my clients can't come, you know, right at the moment of the incident, right, of the birth, or in that first month or 3 months or 6 months postpartum. They can't. And even I'll get clients who, you know, at 6, when their children are 6 or 10, then they come and they want to work on their birth story and what happened postpartum, because they finally have time. So I guess I want to say there's plenty of time to do the healing work, and there's also so it's never too late to do the healing work. But also what I realized was I had done a lot of my own healing work and regulated my nervous system in so many ways, and there is always more, right? And there's and so sometimes what we find is we have to go back, right? And that's where, for the practitioners, right, it's developmental trauma. So it might be that it's something that happened at the birth, or it happened at, you know, in the early postpartum, or, you know, during COVID, but it also could be something that happened when the parent was being born, or even ancestral. And so, or, you know, in their own childhood. So that's also somewhere where I think is really important and helpful to look at the own history, and especially if there are triggers and quick to react. You know, I again had all this, you know, this training and healing, and was very regulated when I found myself a new parent with a lot of physical challenges post-birth. I saw reactivity in me that I didn't know where it came from, and then I traced it back through my lineage, and really made sense. Oh, I might have frozen. I know my internet is a little unstable, so I'm sorry if you're not catching all of this. Okay, great. So that's I think really important as far as the healing sometimes, and understanding some of the patterning and the challenges. You know, Amie, you mentioned ADHD and, you know, different things that kids might have. Is like, let's go back, right, to the parents' own developmental stories and to the ancestral history, and there might be some clues there. So that can be important and as a resource.
Yeah. And
I don't know if either of you want to chime in.
Yeah, parents can also look for people who do play therapy and somatic work, or, you know, somatic experiencing, Googling that kind of pairing, so that whoever is working with the child will also have that nervous system body regulation, and not just going for the themes of the play, which are super important too, because I'm a play therapist too, but adding that regulation piece in is really important to make sure that a person that is working with your child understands sort of the whole picture. You know, we're not separate emotions and separate body, like it's all together. So those are some things that I would encourage people to look for if you're looking for someone to work with your child.
I would also say, add to that for any of the practitioners that are joining us today, like if you are, I think there's so few of us that actually work with, 18 and under, that if you are curious at all, like I would say, go for it. Like start working, find a good supervisor and start exploring working with kids. I love it. I mean, before the pandemic, I was telling Amie, my practice was probably 25% adolescents and kids, and now it's almost 80%. which is just really a reflection on how big of a need there is and how hard it's been for kids, you know, the last year and a half for so many different reasons. We're so lucky in the SE community to have Maggie Klein, who was a school psychologist and has written so many great books. And one of her books with Peter is Trauma Proofing Your Kids. And that's like a handbook. Like any parent I work with, I give them that book because there's different chapters on if your child's having surgery or how to deal with school shootings or all the different types of trauma, natural disasters that kids work with. And she just wrote a new book. I actually just got it the other day, Brain Changing Strategies to Trauma-Proof Schools. And there's some really nice exercises in both of those books for parents. And I would encourage any parent just to start mucking around with some of Maggie's exercises, like lots of play and games you can play with your kids. For me, I feel like it's really important to name technology, right? And like how I feel like that has really eroded families. And being home for the last year and a half, I think so many of our kids have oriented towards technology more and more because they don't have their peers to connect with, and that's the only way they are able to connect. And so working with parents on trying to connect with their kids through technology, you know, like, I don't know if any of you have been on TikTok, but I mean, my daughter, you know, she watches TikTok for hours and hours. And I was finally like, let me see what this is. And I literally like got stuck in like a TikTok hole for hours and hours. Like the time just passes. And this is what's happening to our children's brain. Like our brains, they're getting a dopamine hit every 18 seconds. And so they don't know how to read. They don't know, you know, they've forgotten how to study. So helping kids like learn how to reconnect, right, with humans, like face-to-face, social engagement, going outside, playing, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was like a broad like lumping of lots of different things, but these are the things that keep me up at night sometimes when I think about, right, what's coming up for us as practitioners and parents.
Right. And then modeling that as parents. So modeling it, right. So it's so easy for us, right. A lot of our work has gone online, and, you know, whereas in the old days, right, we would model our work and our children would sit next to us, right, you know, shelling peas or making roofs or, you know, taking care of the village. And we don't, of course, want them to sit there on their computer next to us while we work. And so how do we also take care of ourselves, as we've been talking about, and find that regulation and find ways to not be on our own screens, right? So, you know, I have been trying to personally, like what handicraft can I do? You know, so I learned how to make baskets this year with my son, and right, and doing like simple, and I'm an herbalist, so, you know, teaching him about how to make flower essences and make tinctures and, you know, make formulas, and getting him excited about that, so that there's the hands-on, and that's good for me too, right? I'm like, oh no, I have to work, I have to see clients. No, actually, I need to go and get my hands in the garden, right? And I need to get to show my son how to be physical in his body. And so I think that's good for us as parents and, you know, and practitioners, and it teaches our children to do that. The other thing I wanted to share about, you know, how we can be with children is there's and resources, you know, and I'm not trained as a parenting teacher or a parenting coach, but I know there's an organization called Hand in Hand Parenting. And a lot of the premise of it is listening, is giving time for the parents to listen to each other, to listen to the coach. And of course, that's why people come to see us, is because often that's really the bulk of what we're doing, is holding presence and giving time for the grief, the anger, the frustration, all of that to move through, so that we can be more regulated. So that's the big piece of what I do, you know, with my clients, of course, and from a somatic experiencing perspective, it's often listening to different parts of the body and what the body wants to say or show. But that can then also, that can be inside out teaching for them to go and do that with their children. And so, your belly want to say, or what does it want to show you? Yeah. And doing a lot of for the practitioners, doing the side band, doing, what's the sensation, what's the image, what does it want to say, or what does it feel like, the emotion. All of that I found is really helpful for parents to get in their body, so that then they can do that with their children.
Yeah. And it might be interesting for people even now, like, to check in with yourself and see, how are you here? Like, if you wiggle your toes, can you feel your toes? I often have my clients rotate their ankles. So I'm rotating my ankles because if we work through the joints, it helps us be more present. But if everybody does it right now and you rotate your ankles, maybe you rotate your wrists, or you do a gentle hold on one of your wrists if you like that better. And I know, like, just be curious, if you rotate your ankles a little bit and then put them back down on the floor, what do you notice? Some people might not notice anything, which might indicate that your body is still in a freeze, which doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that your body has been in a freeze and it hasn't come out yet. If you can feel it, like for me, I feel like some energy in my ankles. I feel a little blood flow. I feel like it's starting to move up my legs. So noticing for yourself, when you feel present, what is that like compared to when you go spend 30 minutes or an hour on your phone? What does your body feel like afterwards? I notice for myself, if I've got caught in the phone trap or whatever, I just feel kind of blah and even if I go read a book for the same amount of time, because you have to be more present. I mean, yes, you're going to a fantasy place in a book, but there are things that are pulling you into the here and now. And when we're in the here and now, we feel better and we do better. So kind of for parents, practicing for yourself, what helps you feel present? What are the things? Is it touching a blanket? Is it a smell? Is it a craft or an activity? Those kinds of things. Is it going outside for a lot of people? For me, if I just imagine that it's 70 and sunny, that's like perfect. So I live in Minnesota.
Here, come on over. I'm in Long Beach, California.
Jump over, because that's like my perfect, right? So why I live here, but even if I just imagine being in 70 and sunny, like if I can feel the sun on my skin, anything that brings you into the here and now can help downregulate yourself. And then just emotionally, you feel better. So those are good tips for you as a parent, but then also helping your kids to do that. And I know with this discussion springboarded off of how do you find someone to work with your kiddos or with you, but looking for people who understand that. And that's where you're looking from that, somatic lens when you're looking for a practitioner or someone to work with you or your family, somebody who can bring those pieces in.
Yeah, I think it's like, I would say to parents, like, don't underestimate your ability to help regulate your family's nervous system. It just takes one regulated nervous system. The healthy nervous system always wins, right? It does. And so if you can tether to that in yourself, it's really powerful. And so as a parent, it's like whatever you need to do to help yourself, and it can be time away. That's a really big thing, I think, that most parents didn't get during the pandemic, is alone time. There was a great piece in the New York Times, I think it was called The Agony of Pandemic Parenting, and it was a photo essay about especially single parents working at home and just not having any break at all. So how can you get that for yourself? What do you need? Like put the oxygen mask on yourself first, before you put it on your child. Yeah.
Right. And it's important, I think, to remember is that it can be just a couple minutes of doing something to get your own self regulated, and it will shift everything. So it doesn't have to be this really big, like, you know, I have to do yoga every day, I have to do mindfulness every day. I mean, those are great and they're super important. And when we're just talking about if we don't have a lot of time, and a lot of parents don't, just practice. If you're in the car, a lot of times we just let our mind go. And I think sometimes we sort of dissociate, and some part of our brain hopefully is still engaged because we're still driving, but you know, but using those moments anytime or right before bed for 2 minutes, you can see that it can shift you. And it doesn't have to be this big, long, elaborate thing that you do. We can add those pieces, you know, throughout the week, which is great, but throughout a regular scheduled day, just a minute here and there could shift your whole day, and your child's day too.
Yeah, exactly. I remember actually reading some research about if you're activated, that it takes 90 seconds. If you can pause for 90 seconds, breathe for 90 seconds, then the activation will decrease by at least half. And so that's, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time, right? It's like just several deep breaths. And we forget that it's just a few deep breaths, or just walking to the bathroom and walking back, right? Just giving yourself a moment to ground, to feel your feet on the floor, to feel if you're sitting, to feel your sits bones on the surface of the chair underneath you, to look around, right? It can be really quick. Thanks.
There are really whole new frontiers in child psychology, y'all. I mean, that's just what's really apparent listening here. Like, I'm just imagining how different this conversation might have been 15 years ago. But you've so innovated, used innovated in a conversation about the nervous system. You innovated physiology into how the psychology works. And, you know, my parent mind thinks, how liberating is that? It sounds like I don't have to just talk about problems. You're going to tell me ways to wiggle my body or to settle my body. And that's just, it sounds like there's access and empowerment. And I just want to name in the framework of public health how radical it is. I mean, you're talking about the necessity for touch with kiddos as part of the regulation thing. Now, of course, safe touch is, of course, a very, of key concern when we're talking about touch with children, which is why ethical practices, whether you're body work or licensed any mental health provider, include a lot of parameters around touch. But thinking about safety and lack of safety, there's a question that showed up from Ellen. And Ellen, I'd like you, if you are willing to ask your question live, if you'd like to come on screen with us, we'd love to have you. If you could raise your little blue hand, we can bring you over and have you ask the panelists. And meanwhile, while Ellen is figuring that out and Deanna is checking if she raised the hand or not, I just want to say, working in disaster, working in crisis response, which has been my background, we know that ACEs qualifiers increase drastically in high crisis events. By this, I'm talking about, of course, domestic violence, child abuse, when people are in very disempowering situations, those kinds of, human fragility just goes haywire. So this year, there's been a lot more instances of abuse, an increase in suicides, a crazy increase in teen suicides. So Ellen, have you raised the hand to come over and ask your question? Yes, okay, here comes Ellen to go ahead and pitch one to you guys to that effect. And Ellen, if you could turn on your video and your audio.
So my question was really just about working with children. I'm working right now with a family where there's been some domestic abuse, and this little girl is presenting, she's about 9 years old and presenting with a lot of emotional regulation difficulties and behavioral, issues. She's living with her mom now and has supervised visits with her dad. And I think she's mostly witnessed a lot of, difficulty, emotional, somewhat physical abuse between the parents. probably her whole life. And this sounds like, you know, an approach. I've tried a lot of behavioral things with her and her mom. And I've talked to the mom about, you know, when she's really out of control, you know, having the mom give herself a little break, a timeout, and it's too hard. The kid is like banging on the doors and whatever. So I'm just like thinking, I'm just wondering if any of you have dealt with families who've had these kind of issues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sara,
yes.
It's your whole game practice.
Yes. I think the beginning is helping people frame the behaviors. So when you're in a situation that's not safe, that's going to activate your fight or flight, you know, in your nervous system, fight, flight, freeze nervous system. And a lot of kids too that are in really domestic violence or emotional abuse or whatever, they have what we're taught in somatic experiencing is what's called an incomplete fight or an incomplete flight response, meaning at some point their body wanted to get away, or at some point their body wanted to fight back and they couldn't because they're a child and it's not safe. And so then what happens is that fight or flight is still in the nervous system. And so it doesn't take much to trigger that. So looking at when a child is out of control behaviorally, that's their fight or flight, and their little nervous system in that moment thinks that they are being chased by a bear. They think the house is on fire, like their nervous system is pouring out all of those chemicals that normally would be there if there was actually an emergency in that moment. So that's where that regulation piece comes in. And a lot of kids in a situation like that cannot regulate by themselves with that big of adrenaline and fight or flight coursing through their system. So really, that's where parent regulation comes in, working with the parents on their own and helping them to understand that your child's not misbehaving or acting out or being naughty. Yeah, they've got a lot of big energy. So we kind of have to match them, not in aggressively, but like if they're really big, one option might be like, I can see you have a lot of energy in your body right now. You wouldn't want to say, I can see you have a lot of energy in your body right now. Like that's going to feel super invalidating and it's going to bring more. But a lot of times we've got to find ways to help that incomplete fight complete. So it wouldn't be like, I'm not going to try and calm the child like that. An example might be, is something called push hands, which is where you offer your hands for the child. And usually these exercises you're going to actually do not when the child's dysregulated, at least to begin with, because you want to make it safe. So you introduce this game called push hands. I'm going to stand. It's hard when I'm on screen to show you, but if I would be standing with one foot in front of me and one behind, so I'm braced, and I'd have my hands out like this, and I would have them put their hands on mine, and I would tell them, okay, the rule of the game is you can't shove me, but the rule of the game is when I say go, you're going to start to push with all your might and see if you can push me across the room. And so you put your hands up here, you tell them go, and they start to push, and you hold first because you want them to feel met with that intensity that's there. So you hold it, and then you keep holding while you simultaneously start to move backwards slowly while they're still exerting pushing. And usually what'll happen is by the time they get you to the other side of the room, they're like,
laughing.
Oh, yes. And they'll be like, I want to do it again. So you can do it again. So, I mean, there's different exercises. I know Kate mentioned the book Trauma-Proofing Your Kids is great. It's got a lot of exercises in it like that. Then when you've done those kinds of things with a child, then when they're dysregulated and they're really big like that, you can offer push hands. Now, the hard thing is, side note, is when they're in a really big fight response, our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, goes offline. It's not available. So even though they like the push hands, if they're in a really big fight, they're gonna fight against you, and they're not gonna want to do it.
Yeah.
That's why we do the exercises outside of the big moments, to try to discharge some of that energy, so that the next few times they're in it, maybe it's not quite as big and they might be able to do it with you. Another one I use is, you can buy something called Anytime Snow. If you want, you can buy them. They're like snowballs. Yeah, the Minnesotan is telling you this. They're like these cloth snowballs or whatever. And I've used them at home with my kids. Like if they're super dysregulated, I'll just grab the Anytime Snow. And you can also use like a laundry basket full of socks. I just start throwing them at them. And what'll happen is, if they're in that fight, they'll kind of get a little bit like, what are you doing? And then they'll grab one and throw it back at you. And then you guys are throwing them back and forth. And the next thing you know, you're laughing. And now we've got some regulation, you know. So those are just some ideas, but learning how to see that what's happening with kiddos like that is that it's really a nervous system issue, not an emotional regulation issue. And if your prefrontal cortex is offline, you can't tell yourself to do the skills that somebody taught you, right? Because your thinking brain is just not there. So it's really inviting action and trying to help them move through that and release some of it, so that it's not there. So I know that was kind of a long answer, but those are the kinds of things that I do with kiddos and their families to help them bring regulation. It might be just, we're going to start doing jumping jacks, or we're going to run around the house, you know, whatever you can get them to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have, can I add a little something? It's such a good question, Ellen, and thank you so much for working with, you know, that population, because they need us so much. But one of the things also that I think is really helpful is when there is calmness, right? Or there's just neutrality, like helping her orient towards safety, right? Trauma physiology orients towards danger. We're always like, where's it going to come from? Like, so when things are neutral, like what helps you feel safe right now? Like just notice in this moment that we're safe, you know, and like, how do you know that we're safe? What helps you feel safe? Maybe it's a stuffed animal, or the door is locked, or it's just mommy, and like really helping her embody that sense of, in this moment, in the here and now, I'm safe. This is one of the great things about SE, is that we don't want our clients to get stuck in what we call the trauma vortex. We are always pushing them towards the counter vortex and an experience of embodied safety, really. And so highlighting that often, helping her mom highlight that a lot. You know, with COVID too, that was something that I was working with my kids all the time. Like, you know, besides the fact that mommy's like wiping down everything with like Clorox wipes, and like, you know, the mailman comes and
people are dying a day.
Right. That like in this moment, we're safe.
Yeah.
Right. In California, we have earthquakes and things rumble, and everyone gets super activated. And it's like, okay, well, how are we safe right now? We have water, we have an earthquake kit, like what's our plan? You know, like, okay, yes, we're okay.
Oh,
thank you.
I'll add one more thing, which is, if there's time to add one more thing, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with Daniel Siegel and his flipping the lid little metaphor. And this is a really lovely way to get into the somatics and to teach children to do this, and their parents to teach it to them. I've taught my 3-year-old, I've taught other children, different ages. And so for those of you who don't know, you know, it's really understanding that it's a nervous system issue, and that, you know, and this is the tiger, right? When the tiger is in bed, right, our hindbrain, our fight or flight, then here we go, our frontal, our neocortex can just rest over it and think clearly. But if we get activated in that fight flight response, then the tiger is running out for you, right? And that, and so, with parents, like, well, when your child starts doing that, say, oh, let's tuck the tiger back into bed. Let's tuck the tiger in, right? Or how's your tiger? What does your tiger need? So it's kind of like, if you don't have a puppet, right? Because of course with play therapy, puppets are really fabulous, but right there you have your hand, and they can do it too and feel it in their own body. Feel how that regulates them. That's just one more resource.
Thank you.
They're pretty amazing. Thank you for coming on and being with us and asking that. I'm sure that you are not alone in what you're working with there, and that's really valuable. So we'll send you back to the attendant side and take the pressure off of being on screen. But thank you for being with us. Beautiful answers, y'all, like timeless, in fact, because those are really all too recurring circumstances. So thank you. Beth, if you want to raise your hand, Beth Brissett, and come online to ask your question. I see a really good one there too. Kate, when you mentioned the books earlier, people were chatting and asking for more books. And so Kiana, who is with us on the panelist side, she works with the Somatic Experiencing International, is over there. She's typed in a couple of them, Trauma Proofing Your Kids, and I think Peter and Maggie's books together. And just before we bring Beth on, I want to say we're getting close to the end of our time. So just keeping an eye on time, but also saying we are so happy that we can provide this free programming. SE International is a nonprofit corporation that provides training to therapists, body workers, coaches, medical professionals, alternative medical professionals, public health workers, and emergency responders, anybody who works one-on-one with people in crisis or trauma to help resolve their trauma. So if you want to know more about SE International, hey, I'm the director of public health and I'd love to let you know more. If you've never taken an SE training and you're hearing all about this nervous system and you're like, what do they mean tracking? And I think I heard resonance and I think I heard regulating, and all this stuff starting to sound pretty good. It makes some actual innate sense, I find. When I stumbled upon SE, I was like, oh, that makes such deep sense. That was in 2005 and I've never looked back because it's been so life-changing. If you'd like to take an SE Basics training, which is a 3-hour introduction, I do have authorization to be able to give you, if you have attended this live, I have authorization to be able to give you access to that for free. It's usually like, I think it's $50 or $65, but if you are here today and this is part of the world you're working in and you're curious, email me and Kiana at publichealth@traumahealing.org. Kiana will put that in the Q&A for you, so you'll be able to see it. Yep, I see you, Monica. publichealth@traumahealing.org, and you'll get access to another SEP giving an introduction to SE. And then the SE training is actually a 3-year-long training that happens, like, you do it a couple of weekends, you intersperse it with your work, you grow and develop in it, and it's pretty phenomenal. And yeah, game
changing.
Right? I was more activated before I started taking it. I'm still just right here, but I was more. But now I can, with prosody and joy, understand my own activation as I'm working with my clients, which really is helpful. So that said, we'd love to help you with that. We'd also love to beg. Here's your NPR public service announcement. We beg for you to donate to us today. That first message in the chat has traumahealing.org/donate. If you donate, there's a bunch of different boxes you could donate at. The COVID-19 Crisis Relief Fund is what this program is funded under. This is funded as a crisis response relief program. If you donated $1, it would communicate to the staff that, hey, 10 people donated $1. If you donated $1 million, it would communicate to the staff, hey, 1 person donated $1 million. So, don't let us stop you, but it does help us know what the value of this is. And if you'd like to help us keep doing this so we can examine what are more socially vulnerable populations who might be serviced. That last question, you can imagine how far reaching it is to help with families working through abuse and domestic violence issues, and having this kind of resource begin to become available in those communities is really important. So we thank you in advance for donating that $1 million, and we'll certainly send you a receipt because it is tax deductible. That said, Beth, if you want to go ahead and turn on your video, I think we have you on. You can go ahead and ask your question. And folks, how do we feel about going overtime a little bit? If we go over about 15, I know some folks will jump off the line, I'm sure. You'll be able to see this posted on our SE International YouTube channel. But are you guys okay if we go another 15 minutes so we can get this sorted out? Okay. Thanks, Beth. Welcome. Go ahead and share your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a question regarding sort of sending our children back to school. My son was virtual last year, and then obviously for the last few months when the pandemic first hit, and he's very nervous about going to school. So he had a few months of his kindergarten year, and that was it. And so now he's going to start second grade, and it's all different. And obviously everyone's expected to be separate and no touching, and everyone has masks, and it's a new environment. And I just have concerns for that. And he's anxious. And I just wonder if there were any tips that I could maybe send him with to help any trauma response or anxiety that's going to be, he's not going to have a lot of support to help work that out being in the classroom. So anything would be great.
I guess as a parent, I would ask you if it's okay, just like in this moment, even as you name that question, like, what are you noticing, in your own body about him going back to school, right?
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking, I think, for all of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot. And maybe just for a minute, we can just all be together, those of us that are parents or work with parents, like, and just noticing, Beth, if it's okay, like, just because I've been there, like, I'm really feeling into your own nervous system, just what happens inside for you, thinking about your son going back to school. What do you?
It definitely, it's activated just now, being that I am talking sort of unexpectedly. Right. So I am definitely activated, but yes, aside from that, now I do activate when I think about that. And I know regulation for me is a big piece of that. It's there.
Yeah, it's there. I think I'm so glad you asked the question, because it's so there for so many of us. Yeah. I think one of the things that's really helpful, since it's summer, there's a nice breath, is just starting to have more outings, right, out of the house, because I know a lot of families are still really oriented like inside the home. And so whatever way feels safe for you, to go outside, to maybe go to the park, start to get him comfortable with wearing a mask with other people, maybe take him to the store with you, things like that maybe feel safe. And again, like I was talking about earlier, like this idea about orienting towards safety, like what things is the school doing to help you feel safe? And I think as a parent, I don't know, you Chanti and Sara, maybe you can back me on this, but like sometimes we have to fake it. Like like I'm free. I am freaking out like inside that you're going back, but I'm kind of gonna fake it and just like remind you and remind myself, like, you're gonna be okay. And it'll be so nice to see your teacher and your friends, and, like at whatever, many of us have developed lots of like obsessive cleaning rituals, like maybe trying to like hide your washing of the lunchbox 20 times, like from your child, or like, just sort of like faking it, like, we're okay. Yeah, we're good. It's important to be in school. It's important to be with your teachers. And it really is. That's what we're really learning, like having kids home for this long has really, really, it's been really damaging to development. So I don't know,
Yep.
Sara.
Yeah, I was going to add, so number one, I think like what you're saying, Kate, is actually spot on and very important. Noticing your own regulation, and then what do you need to do to work yourself through it and your child. Another thing that you can do that's another like sort of practical piece is to play about going to school. So you could use stuffed animals, you could use trucks, like it doesn't have to be people, because for kids, if they're really anxious, if you're using little figures of people, or if you're role playing, like, hey, I'm going to be a kid and I'm going to pretend going to school and you be the teacher, or let's both pretend we're kids, like that might be too close because it's too real. So stuffed animals or trucks is a way to kind of ease into it a little bit. Hey, you got all your trucks out here. Let's pretend they're going to school. And then you can have one of them go, I don't want to go to school. I'm gonna have to wear my mask all day. And, and like, just see what he does with it. And letting him kind of move the direction of the play, and seeing if you can help support him to kind of get used to the idea that way. But play is a big way of how kids process, and they're using their bodies all the time. Like, if it'll give you information if he's like, I don't want to do that. Like, and if he kind of pulls in, or she, then we've got more of a freeze. So then you're going to want to work more on like just body awareness, like, let's just do some fun games where, I'm going to draw letters on your back and you tell me can you tell what letter I drew, or things like that. Or, but play is a great intervention as a way to kind of help them manage their emotions, and do it in a way that feels safe. And they can sort of practice going to school and their emotions through the play.
Thanks.
Hope that helps. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. He's definitely more of like a freeze kid, so helping him get in his body, that's really useful tips. So thank you.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of things, again, with safety. So, do things like, I don't care how old the kid is, they love if you can do this, but you need another person for this one, but like a blanket swing. So where you lay the blanket down and you have him lay down in it. And then the two of you pick up the blanket and you swing, you sing to your child, like some song you've always sang to them or something, or we do Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, what a special boy you are, and just, it's amazing to me how kids love that. And it brings them back to memories of when they felt safe in their body, and it helps them feel safe and embodied now. So those are different things. Or putting on lotion, and rubbing it in and massaging their hands, and asking him which, do you like it better on your hands or your feet? And, different things like that to help him be able to get back in his body.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question, Beth, and stimulating that incredible conversation. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's amazing. Thank you for mentioning more of the senses too. I don't know if y'all know Bert Rogers. He's another SEP he works with homicide surviving families. So whole families, after somebody has lost their life to homicide, comes in. I can't imagine what those children are going through, let alone, everybody. Grief, upset, crisis. And when you just said that, Sara, he says, well, I always do the chapstick intervention. If you pull out a tube of chapstick, the smell of chapstick is always so familiar that familiarity just pulls you to a moment. And I thought about how we use the slinky intervention. You just talk about the sound of a slinky. And as I do this, someone starts to come into their senses of smell or sound or other senses. So it's fun. We love playing with senses. So we have another really great question. Are you guys okay with us bringing another on? It's getting pretty rich. This is the fun part. It started late, but you guys have been sharing the best. Lauren Luna, if you would like to come online, please raise your little blue hand. Her question has me starting to think about grief and guilt. I did lose 2 family members in the last year around COVID, and found my own challenges as an adult person. And then one of them had grown kids who were all teenagers and in their 20s, and they're just beside themselves with the grief, and they're blaming themselves that perhaps they were careless and they brought it home. And so that sort of teenage rebellion turned into, did I have a part in causing dad to be ill. So there's a lot of questions around that. And Lauren, I'll let you get a little bit more specific, but if we can speak to that also kind of broadly, I think there's a lot of grief and guilt in the world. Lauren, you could go ahead and turn on your video. We have got you with us. Thank you.
And can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
wonderful. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just wondered if y'all could speak a little bit just to maybe that specific grief piece, because there are many things that are going to dysregulate our systems that just aren't going to end. I mean, we're in a pandemic that it's getting better, but there's no end to it in sight. And then there's this piece with this family where there's the loss of the grandfather who, and that's not going to end. And yeah, I think Amie did a good job of sort of recapping, but I'm just thinking about ways to help. So I'm working with the mother, and she has 2 teenage children. And yeah, if y'all just had any sort of thoughts around what kind of support to offer her as someone who's trying to go through the grieving process herself, and really wanting to protect her children from that fear of like, could we have done this? Could we have caused this? Just, a big thing to have gone through. So, yeah.
Well, I can share. It's, I don't know how SE this is, and it's maybe a little bit more even California, a little more spiritual. But I work a lot with loss, but early loss, like abortion, miscarriage, stillbirth, and but I think it still relates to what you're sharing, which is that, again, I think I've mentioned I do a lot of repatterning work, and because there can be guilt even years later, and so I actually will, if a client is open to it, I will have, maybe not right away, but if there's things that weren't said, or if they're feeling, the guilt specifically and the grief, but can be addressed by actually like imagining that you're talking with the one that's not there anymore. And so I guess in a way it could be maybe more parts work, but I don't know. I don't have a name for it exactly, but I have found that it's very helpful for clients, and sometimes even just lighting a candle, doing a simple ritual, lighting a candle for the session, or, bringing in something special, a little altar item of, something that represents the grandfather, or, the one that was lost. And then just saying the things that they wanted, that they wish that they could have said, or that they want to say now. Sometimes writing a letter. So it's, this, I don't know how, maybe you're already doing this, but that can settle the nervous system, because they're holding this incompletion, right? We were talking about completing the cycle. And so if someone is gone, we often don't get the completion that we need. And so this is an opportunity to complete. And that's something that maybe, with children really understand ritual, simple rituals. They understand making offerings, putting something special under a tree. That's something physical that they can do. And even teenagers can do that, right? Something that represents their connection to whoever has isn't there with them anymore. It's the first thing that comes to me.
Adding to that, Chanti, it's helping then the teenagers and the mom or the parents or the people who are going through loss to understand that research actually supports that if we imagine doing something, that our body and our nervous system will respond as if it actually happened. Right. So being able to imagine talking with the person that's gone, being able to say, I'm scared I'm the one who brought it home to you, or, to say all those things and being able to imagine doing it, that will change the nervous system. And so, because a lot of times people will say, well, he won't know this problem. He won't know. He still won't know. And then helping them understand that this is something then for you and your body will know that you have expressed what you needed to do. And if you imagine saying it to them, that helps your body process it.
I wanna name too that, and I'm actually still like with Amie and her losses and also the loss in this family, that this is a real fear for many kids. And I think it's a big barrier for kids that are returning to school in the fall. Like if I go to school, I could bring COVID home. And I mean, I've had kids say like, I'm gonna kill my mom, you know, and she's my only caregiver. And if she dies, then I'm gonna have to go live with my abusive father. So I can't go to school. Like kids are carrying that. And if you think about the exposure that we all had to this, to the early days of COVID and the pervasive terror cloud that we were all under, you know, with the news and all the unknown, that energy is still very much embedded in kids right now. And that's the energy that we're working with, and that it sounds like this family still has sort of floating around. And so, you know, kind of in a way going back to the early days of COVID and helping the family also release some of that survival physiology, you know, from that is really helpful. Like, so yeah, I know that feels so big and dark, like just even dropping into it, you know, together, but it's still really here.
No, but it's nice to have a space too to tap into that with y'all. So
yeah, because it's like you see people are out having fun and going to concerts and like life is normal and we're good, but it's for so many people, they're still under that, you know, big trauma cloud of COVID. So yeah.
Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And really important question. You know, I got a lot out of that response. So thank you for queuing that up.
No problem. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, so being here in these times, and Kate, I love the delicacy with how you just named all of that. I'm thinking now about that diagram we constantly look at in SE training, or that Dan Siegel's window of tolerance, and just knowing like there's this range of, you know, what we can take in life, and just to name for us that life is the process of that window of tolerance widening, hopefully, being intentional about how we care for ourselves. So where the very real circumstances of life, like illness and death and difficulty and challenges occur, we can be more embodied, stronger. And so I want to name, as we start to wrap up, something that you all have contributed to enormously, is that one thing that humans just sort of do it automatically, but I think we in the sort of SE neuropsychology world know is important, is we're stronger together. Like I'm an introvert. No one ever believes me when I say that, but I'm like, hey, it just means I like depth and one-on-one relating more than chamber of commerce or conferences and big, great. But we need that depth of connection and relating. So that's why I always love being with everyone. I hang out in the panelists and the Q&A here, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I know you all so much. Dave, thanks for all the things you've been saying the whole time. Monica, can't wait to meet you. Everyone who's been here, like we're here with you, and that's so great. And panelists, you've been here with each other. Panel, Sara, Kate, and Chanti. Hi, I have names. It's so nice to just be with you like this. And that I'm naming that so we can really be deliberate and intentional to let that nourishment in, because it flies by. Like an hour and a half just flew by, right? Yeah. And so if we don't intentionally let it in, it's like we're not nourished, we're not fed. It's like life becomes fast food instead of broccoli or kale. So I think what I want to ask, just in following up that last question, in closing, since I'm guessing you work with play and nourishment in each of your own worlds, and I feel like you're all treasure troves. People have been sending me text message during this. I'm calling Kate, I'm calling Sara. I wanted to be Chanti when I was a kid. I'm getting really like, I've inspired a lot of people. What's something you could leave parents and children or mental health practitioners who we know on this line are burnt out right now too? Yeah. What can you leave us with that's nourishing, one form of play or nourishment? And this is the hard part. It hasn't been named yet. Give us more, like more veggies, more. How do you unwind or play or an exercise or something to just increase your enjoyment of life, your capability to be with it. No pressure.
Like for ourselves, like as individuals, you mean, or as a family?
What everything that's coming out of your mouths is such gems and diamonds. I have enjoyed this so much. There's nothing you can't say right now that I'm not gonna just love. So you just say whatever is fun for you, whatever really fills you up, because you model that for us. You trailblaze for us by learning these things and putting them into deliberate practice.
Yeah.
I can say, like, speaking of TikTok and having teenagers, like it's been really fun to like play with my daughter and make music and dance and like just be silly. You know, I live with a family of musicians, and I am not musical at all. So like sometimes I'll lay on the floor and ask my partner to play the drums and just like soak that in my body, like moving, goofiness, just laughing, inappropriate humor, jokes, like, yeah, like we have to. I mean, there's no way to be with this, like, without breaks and laughter. It's really
right. And try a hand at something new. Like I tried painting this year, which that's what that is behind there. Like,
wow.
so, you know, but you know, like something like that, you might not believe me, but any of you can do, because it's called acrylic because it's very forgiving. You know, seriously, Google it or whatever. But I found for me, you know, I've had to find like, what can I do, you know, so that I'm not just sitting here on my phone. And then I got, you know, finding things you can get excited about, things you can share with people. Now it's filtered out. Now my daughter, she has her friends over, and she's, you know, she just turned 20, so she's still in my house, but you know, they come over and now they paint for the afternoon, and they're all painting, you know. So just finding anything, even if you think, well, I can't do that, like give it a try, and you know, you might find some things that you didn't know you would enjoy.
Yeah. I think for me, you know, I mean, I'm really appreciating what you said about stronger together, and we can't see all of you who are watching, listening, tuning in, but when you said that, I really felt all of you, and I felt the connection, and how for me that's play. And I imagine for a lot of us, right, who are deep divers, who really want to help change the world and change ourselves, it's like, I love to connect. And so, you know, dropping in with another person, another being, either in person, you know, now that that's happening a little bit more, or even online, even here, we can share our hearts and ourselves with each other. And so that feeds me. That is so deeply nourishing. And then touch, right? I'm a body worker. And so, you know, maybe if everyone right now just wants to like put their hands right here and just soften into your vagus nerve and the social engagement we've been doing, and maybe even just do a little stroking behind the ears and down the neck, you know, if that feels good to you, right? And all the way even down to the chest, you know, your eyes, your cheeks, all of this stimulates really gently your vagus nerve, right? Which we know helps us with connection to ourselves and to others. That to me, that goes so far. So I feel I can see you all, even though I can't see you, I can see you doing it with us. It feels really nice. Right? We're all regulating together.
Really magnificent, y'all. Thank you so much. Can I acknowledge you from the depth of my heart for all that you have brought today. This has been one of the most powerful sessions I think we have had together in this series, and I'm moved, really moved. Why do I always do that?
Making me cry too.
I say, you get a little teary, like move your wrists, get more capacity. These little tricks are good. Look, I'm good. We're good.
Our windows are growing.
Yeah, but we're really so in this together. And I really got with each one of you in your lives, your commitment, what you're a stand for in the world you work in, and how you've been a stand for everyone else here. Just really want to acknowledge you for that. I really want to acknowledge everyone at the Institute who's helped us pull these together. Each month we kind of scramble and go, who are our most magnificent SCPs who we haven't met yet, who we want to spotlight and showcase and let the world get to know. And so Kiana, who works closely with me developing these programs, has posted in the chat a link to, if you have interest in being a panelist on a future event, fill out our Speakers Bureau form. Please do that and let us know the subject matter area that you might excel in, and do not underestimate who you are. We keep finding that there are some really phenomenal humans in our little ecosystem, and I'd love to just keep showcasing each one of you to the world. Next month in August, we'll be meeting and talking about fitness and movement. Now, the SC community has had a little bit of like a woo background. You know, therapists who are into sort of California West Coast lifestyle alternative approaches may have discovered this long ago, but at this moment in history, you know, neuropsychology is groundbreaking into more traditional, more conventional conversations. And so we're part of that. So we're hoping to talk about, you know, maybe athletic directors, physical therapists. Where does this stuff help and support that kind of work? So that will be next month. And then we'll be doing another month coming up soon on emergency first responders, from law enforcement, public safety to fire. We're developing crisis stabilization programs and piloting those in Native American, Indigenous, First Nation communities. So you'll be hearing more about that. So track us each month. We have a newsletter where we send updates, a Facebook page, an Instagram, and get that stability. We may all be sick of Zoom. I certainly am, like anyone else, but you can see in this time together, we really got to be together on these important topics, and each participant mattered. So come with us and grow our community and our vlogcast expanding world of SE. So thank you. Thank you to Marv Tuttle, our executive director, all the staff, Dion, who is behind the scenes as our tech specialist, Rebecca, who is our community membership and social media manager, and Laura, who gets us on the webpage. We have so many people who are just important to this, and we thank and acknowledge all of them, and most especially you. We wouldn't do this if no one showed up to listen. So you're extraordinarily important. Thanks for being with us. Give yourselves a hug, a round of applause, a little yoo-hoo, whatever feels great. Is there anything else we need to say before we close, anyone? Solid.
Thank you, Amie. And yeah, and just remember, it's never too late to get support and to find what you need for yourself and for your family. Yeah. Do it now.
There are people out there doing all kinds of cool support things. You can find it. Oh, there is a practitioner directory for somatic experiencing professionals. If you go to traumahealing.org, in that top menu line, it'll say directory or practitioner, something like that. We've just upgraded our website, and you can look up practitioners in your state. So please do connect with one if you need support. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amie.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay, enjoy your summer. School's out for summer. Okay, I didn't do that. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.